On a winter night in 39 AD, Rome froze. Not from the cold, from the sound of footsteps stopping outside a door. You're barely grown. You've been in the Garden of Venus for 11 days. 11 days of silk sheets and perfumed air and food you've never tasted before. 11 days of not knowing why you're here. 11 days of watching other girls get taken in the night and come back different, quieter, emptier. Some don't come back at all. Tonight, the footsteps stop at your door. 2 servants enter. They don't look at your face. They never look at your face. One carries a bowl of oil that smells like roses and something else, something metallic underneath. The other carries white silk so thin you can see through it. They undress you without speaking. Their hands are cold, professional. They've done this before. They rub the oil into your skin until you shine like marble in the lamplight. They drape the silk over your body, but it hides nothing. That's the point. They braid your hair with golden thread. They paint your lips red. You ask where they're taking you. They don't answer. You ask what's going to happen. They don't answer. One of them, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair, pauses at the door. For a moment, you think she might say something, might warn you, might tell you the truth. Instead, she whispers 4 words. Don't fight. Don't scream. Then they lead you down a corridor lit by torches toward a door you've never seen before. Behind it, you can hear music, laughter, the clink of wine cups, and underneath all of it, something else. A sound you can't identify yet. A sound you'll never forget. People always ask the same question when Caligula's name comes up. What actually happened to the girls? Without euphemisms, without cowardice? So let's say the quiet part out loud. This wasn't a rumor. It was violence turned into theater, and Rome's elite learned to smile through it. By the end of this story, you'll understand why some of them tried to disappear inside their own bodies. Why death would have felt like mercy, and why Rome buried this so deep they prayed no one would ever dig it up. They hoped wrong. But before you understand what happened behind that door, you need to understand how she got there. How did any of them get there? Because Caligula didn't hunt these girls himself. He built a system, a machine. And that machine ran on paperwork. Imperial officials traveled in pairs through Rome and the surrounding territories. They carried wax tablets, bronze seals, and quotas to fill. They weren't looking for criminals. They weren't recruiting soldiers. They were shopping, and they had 3 criteria. Age, young enough to control, old enough to terrify. Beauty, faces that would please the emperor. Bodies treated like inventory. Officials made notes. Hair, eyes, posture, refinement. Purity. Whether true or not, the label mattered. It made the seizure sound ceremonial instead of criminal. And Rome loved a holy word that could hide a dirty act. The families who were selected celebrated. They dressed their daughters in white linen. They braided flowers into their hair. Neighbors watched in rigid silence as carriages arrived to carry the girls up the Palatine Hill. Some mothers cried as their daughters rode away. But they cried quietly, because crying loudly would suggest this wasn't a privilege, and suggesting the emperor's attention wasn't a privilege was treason. So they swallowed their tears, swallowed their doubts, told themselves their daughter would serve in ceremonies, would walk beside greatness, would return with honor and an advantageous marriage. They told themselves lies because the truth was unsurvivable. The wax tablets piled up in palace offices, hundreds of names, ages, physical descriptions, family connections that might prove useful, political leverage attached to young flesh. This wasn't the chaos of a madman. This was inventory management. Human trafficking stamped with imperial seals and filed like routine business. Later writers describe Caligula inspecting women the way a buyer inspects property, turning the human body into an object before anything even happened. Even Suetonius, a man who documented murders and orgies without flinching, seemed uncomfortable writing what came next. But being selected was only the beginning. What happened during the waiting was designed to destroy them before Caligula ever touched them. They called it the Garden of Venus. The name sounds beautiful, romantic, a place where young women might learn poetry and music, surrounded by fountains and flowers. It was a prison, but here's what made it worse than any dungeon. A dungeon looks like a dungeon. Cold stone, iron chains. You know where you stand. You know you're a captive. The Garden of Venus looked like paradise. Silk curtains in colors these girls had never seen. Beds softer than anything they'd touched in their lives. Perfume so thick you could taste it on your tongue. Food that senators couldn't afford. Servants who smiled and answered every request. Everything is beautiful. Everything is comfortable. Everything is wrong. The girls couldn't leave their rooms without permission. Couldn't send messages to their families. Couldn't ask when they'd go home. They didn't know what day it was. Didn't know what they were supposed to do. Didn't know what would happen if they broke rules no one had explained. They just waited. Sometimes for days. Sometimes for weeks. The uncertainty was the first weapon. Your mind starts eating itself when you don't know what's coming. When every footstep in the corridor might be the one that stops at your door. When every night might be the night they finally come for you. The servants watched everything. Every tear reported. Every whisper is documented. If two girls started forming a friendship, finding comfort in shared fear, they'd be separated within hours, moved to different wings, isolated again. Connection breeds strength. Strength breeds resistance. Caligula understood this. Loneliness was part of the design. At night, they heard footsteps passing their doors, stopping at another door, a girl being taken. And the next morning, that girl would be different. She'd sit in corners and stare at walls. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Something behind her face had been switched off, or she wouldn't come back at all. In the 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman discovered something disturbing. When subjects learned that nothing they did could change their situation, they stopped trying. They surrendered, not from weakness, because their brains were trying to protect them from madness. He called it learned helplessness. The girls in the Garden of Venus were being systematically broken, not through violence, not yet, through luxury that felt like a trap, through kindness that hid cruelty, through waiting that never ended. By the time they were summoned, most had already surrendered. That was the point, because what came next required a victim who wouldn't fight back. Now you know what the other videos wouldn't tell you, what actually happened when a girl was summoned. It started with the preparation. Servants stripped them bare, rubbed oils into their skin until they glistened, dressed them in silk so thin it concealed nothing. The garments weren't clothing, they were humiliation made into fabric, designed to remind each girl that her body was no longer hers, that she was property being prepared for use. Then came the walk, down corridors lined with Praetorian guards who stared straight ahead, past doors behind which other girls waited for their turn, toward the sounds of music and laughter and clinking cups, toward the emperor's banquet hall. This is what most people avoid saying plainly. It wasn't just abuse. It was staged, performed inside power, surrounded by witnesses who needed to stay alive. Caligula didn't assault them in dark rooms where no one could see. He did it in front of audiences. Senators, generals, officials, men who governed Rome by day, forced to watch the emperor's entertainments by night. Sometimes, the girl's own father sat at those tables, forced to smile, forced to nod, forced to watch his daughter being violated and pretend it was an honor. The physical brutality left damage that lasted. Some could barely stand afterward. And the palace didn't stop to feel shame, only to reset the asset so the machine could keep running. Suetonius hints at this. Cassius Dio implies it. The ancient sources dance around the specifics because even Romans who watched people die in arenas found this difficult to document. But the physical pain wasn't the worst part. When Caligula finished, he talked. He judged her like merchandise, praising, mocking, comparing, while she stood there unable to escape the eyes around her. Compared her to the others, made jokes, described what he'd done in graphics, detail while the girl stood there, bleeding, shaking, unable to cover herself. The senators laughed when they were supposed to laugh, applauded when they were supposed to applaud, because the alternative was death, and it didn't end after one night. Girls were summoned again and again. Some every few days, they never knew when. Never knew if tonight would be the night the footsteps stopped at their door. The anticipation was its own torture, a wound that never closed because it kept getting reopened. Those who resisted learned quickly. One girl fought back, scratched the emperor's face. By morning, her father had been arrested. Her brothers were stripped of their positions. Her mother dragged from their home. The girl was brought to the next banquet to watch Caligula describe what would happen to her family if she ever raised a hand again. After that, no one resisted. And when Caligula grew bored with a girl, he didn't free her. He loaned her out, gave her to favored senators as a reward. Accept the gift, and you've participated in the system. Refuse, and you've insulted the emperor. Either way, you're trapped. Either way, you're complicit. Either way, Caligula owns you. But the physical horror was only half of Caligula's design. The true evil was what he forced the men of Rome to become. The girls weren't the only ones Caligula wanted to break. He wanted everyone, every senator, every general, every powerful man in Rome. He wanted them shattered and silent and complicit. The banquets were his theater of humiliation. Picture the scene. Marble halls filled with Rome's elite, the men who commanded legions, the men who wrote laws, the men who believed they were the spine of civilization. They reclined on couches, drank expensive wine, and made small talk while pretending everything was normal. Then Caligula would stand, walk between the tables, examine the wives of his guests the way a butcher examines cuts of meat. He'd select one, take her hand, lead her away to an adjoining room while her husband sat frozen. What could he do? Object? His children would be dead by sunrise. His family name was erased from Roman history, his estates seized, his legacy was destroyed. So he sat, drank his wine, made conversation with the man beside him who was also pretending not to hear the sounds from the other room. 20 minutes. 30. The conversation was brittle. The silences are unbearable. One story survives in the ancient tradition again and again. A husband forced to sit there while the emperor took what was his and then returned to narrate it like comedy. The point wasn't pleasure. The point was ownership, of bodies, of marriages, of dignity. But here's what made the banquets truly evil. It wasn't just about the women. It was about complicity. Once you sat at that table and did nothing while the emperor violated someone's wife, you were guilty too. You couldn't expose him without exposing yourself. You couldn't rebel without admitting you'd been part of the machine. Your silence made you an accomplice, and accomplices don't talk. That's how tyranny actually works. Not through armies alone, through shame, through shared guilt, through making everyone so dirty that no one can point fingers. The senators went home to their families, kissed their children goodnight, pretended they were still honorable men. But they knew, and Caligula knew they knew, and that knowledge was its own kind of chain. For 4 years, Rome's most powerful men sat in silence, until one man decided he'd rather die than swallow another humiliation. Every machine has a flaw. While Caligula was busy breaking senators and destroying young girls, he made a critical mistake. He forgot about the men standing 3 feet away from him with swords on their hips. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguards. Elite soldiers trained to kill without hesitation. They watched everything. They heard everything, and one of them had endured enough. His name was Cassius Chaerea, senior officer, respected veteran, a man who had served Rome with honor for decades. He had one physical characteristic that Caligula found endlessly amusing: a high-pitched voice. Every day brought new mockery, new jokes at Chaerea's expense. In front of other soldiers, in front of senators, in front of everyone. When Chaerea had to ask for the daily military password, a standard protocol required of all guards, Caligula would assign him words designed to humiliate. Venus, kiss me. Priapus, feminine words. Sexual words. The other soldiers would smirk, day after day, month after month, year after year. Suetonius notes that Caligula found this hilarious. He thought Chaerea would swallow it like everyone else, like the senators who watched their wives being taken, like the fathers who smiled while their daughters were violated. He miscalculated. Senators had families to protect. They could rationalize staying quiet, but Chaerea was a soldier, a man trained to solve problems with a blade, a man who stood next to the emperor every single day with a sword on his hip. And Caligula had just taught him that life under this emperor wasn't worth living. January 24th, 41 AD. The Palatine Games. Caligula walks through an underground corridor beneath the theater. Narrow, dimly lit, stone walls on both sides. He's in a good mood, looking forward to a performance. Chaerea is waiting in the shadows. When the emperor approaches, Chaerea steps forward. Standard protocol, he asks for the daily password. Caligula smirks, opens his mouth to deliver one last humiliation, one last joke. He never finishes the sentence. Chaerea screams, "Take this!" His sword drives up under Caligula's ribs. The corridor's too narrow to escape. Conspirators at both ends. They swarm him. 30 stab wounds. They don't stop until nothing remains that could possibly be alive. 4 years of accumulated terror released in 60 seconds of frenzied violence. But they weren't finished. They found his wife. Killed her. Then they found the nursery. His daughter, 2 years old. A soldier grabbed the child and slammed her head against a marble wall. No heirs, no revenge. The bloodline ends here. The machine had consumed its creator. But what happened to the girls still locked in the Garden of Venus when the screaming started? The screaming didn't stop when Caligula died. It was just beginning. His Germanic bodyguards discovered their emperor's body in the corridor, blood pooling on the stone. 30 stab wounds turning cold. They erupted in blind fury, swords drawn, eyes wild. They didn't care who was guilty. They wanted blood. Anyone's blood. The palace became a slaughterhouse within minutes. Servants cut down in hallways, officials butchered at their desks. Anyone unlucky enough to cross paths with the rampaging guards died where they stood. Bodies piled up in corridors, slick with blood. And in the Garden of Venus, the girls heard it all. The clash of metal, the thunder of running feet, screams that stopped too suddenly. They huddled in corners of their silk-draped prisons, gripping each other in the dark, unable to understand if this was rescue or a different kind of death. Some fled barefoot through corridors littered with broken glass and bodies. Others stayed frozen, paralyzed by years of conditioning, waiting to see if the next hand on their door would kill them or free them. Hours later, when the blood haze finally cleared, an unlikely figure emerged from hiding. Claudius, Caligula's trembling uncle. The Praetorian Guard found him cowering behind a curtain and dragged him to the throne. The new emperor faced an impossible problem. What do you do with the girls still locked in the Garden of Venus? If he acknowledges what happened, the entire empire learns Rome's shame. Families demand justice. Senators who participated get exposed. The system unravels. Civil war becomes possible. So Claudius chose silence. The girls were sent home quietly. with gifts, gold, silk, jewels, dowries large enough to buy estates, not compensation, bribes, payment for amnesia. Every coin carried the same unspoken command. Forget. Forget what happened. Forget who did it. Forget everything. Most families took the deal. What choice did they have? Their daughters were damaged goods now. No one would marry them. The best they could hope for was silence, pretend it never happened. But the girls didn't forget. How do you forget something like that? They returned to their villas as strangers, flinched at footsteps, couldn't sleep without a lamp burning, woke screaming from nightmares that would continue for decades. Some never let anyone touch them again. Some stopped speaking entirely, sat by the windows for hours, stared at walls, lost in memories they couldn't escape and couldn't share. One woman, according to fragments found centuries later, didn't speak about the palace for 50 years. 50 years of silence. Then, on her deathbed, she told her granddaughter everything. The granddaughter wrote it down, then burned most of it, but pieces survived, copied by monks who didn't understand what they were preserving, hidden in monastery libraries for centuries. And those fragments are how we know any of this happened. Claudius ordered most of Caligula's records destroyed, the ledgers, the tablets, the documentation of the machine, burned. Rome buried the truth, but some things refused to stay buried. 2,000 years. That's how long it separates Caligula's Rome from the world you're sitting in right now. Different languages, different technology, different civilization, same machine. You already know the modern names. You've seen the headlines. Private islands where powerful men flew on private jets. Young girls recruited with promises of opportunity. Names that stayed protected. Networks that stayed intact. Silence that stayed profitable. Decades of operation while everyone who mattered looked the other way. The patterns are identical, officials processing victims like paperwork. The powerful stay silent because their guilt chains them to the system. Parents handing over children and calling it a privilege. Bureaucrats following orders. Guards doing their jobs. Everyone with an excuse. Nobody is responsible. The machine doesn't care what century it runs in. Doesn't care what language its victims scream in. Doesn't care about empires rising or falling around it. It just runs. Grinding up lives, manufacturing silence, turning human beings into inventory. Caligula's Garden of Venus operated for 4 years before one humiliated soldier finally drove a blade through its creator. 4 years of girls broken and discarded. 4 years of Rome's elite attending banquets and pretending everything was normal. 4 years of families telling themselves their daughters were honored. And the machine only stopped by accident. Not justice, not outrage. One man who'd swallowed enough mockery if Caligula had been slightly more patient, slightly more afraid. The machine keeps running. How long? 40 years? 400? We'll never know. These systems don't fall because they're evil. They fall when someone breaks at exactly the right moment. The rest of the time, they just keep consuming. The girl from the beginning of this story. The one being rubbed with oils. Dressed in silk that hid nothing. Walking towards sounds she couldn't yet identify. We don't know her name. History didn't record it. She was a number on a wax tablet. Inventory. Processed and discarded. But she existed. She had dreams before the knock came. A family who loved her. A life ahead of her that was stolen in a single night. She was real. Someone wept when she came home empty behind the eyes. Someone watched her flinch at footsteps for the rest of her life. Rome wanted her forgotten. They burned the records, bribed the families, buried the truth under marble in silence. But here's the thing about silence. It only works if everyone participates. The only thing that ever stops these machines is someone who refuses to stay quiet. Consider this refusal. If this story gripped you, if it made you feel something, then you understand why we do this. History isn't just dates and names in dusty books. It's real people, real suffering, real lessons that echo across centuries. And we're just getting started. Subscribe to Requiem of Thrones because we don't sanitize the past. We don't hide from the darkness. We pull it into the light so you can see what humanity is capable of. The cruelty, the courage, the moments when someone finally says enough. Hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell so you never miss when we uncover history's next buried secret. And drop a comment below. Tell us where in the world you're watching from today. Rome's empire stretched across continents. Now, so does this story. We want to know how far these voices have traveled, because 2,000 years ago, no one spoke for those girls. Today, thousands of you are listening. That matters. See you in the next one.